everyone. Okay, we have to talk today because I keep getting asked about this, about the comments that Gavin Newsom and others have made recently about whether or not Democratic states should go nuclear on redistricting. I have a lot of thoughts about this. I'm also hearing from others in the field, organizers and the like, that there are some older Democratic-leaning organizations that are advocating against this. I have thoughts about that too. And we've got a lot more to cover today. Also, at the end of this broadcast, we're going to do something like a little bit unusual. And so I just want to make sure you stay tuned till the end, because I've got something for all of you that I think is really relevant to where everybody's mindset is today. And so just sit tight, okay? That's coming at the end. All right. First things first, welcome to Resistance Live. I'm Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. I was a Wall Street lawyer, human rights lawyer for about 15 years. For the last 14 years or so, I've been working as a leadership and an impact consultant to help people make the biggest difference that they can, that they're here to make. And that includes working on everything from tiny little local community actions all the way up to races for the US Senate. Welcome. Today, for our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a chocolate colored tank top. I am wearing a black blazer. My hair is pulled back. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman. I'm in front of my bookshelf and my yellow utility cart, and I'm coming to you, as always, from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohegan land. Okay, so Texas has put forward a new redistricting map. This redistricting map essentially would allow the Republicans to pick up about 5 or so seats in the House of Representatives. This is deeply concerning. And, honestly, the redistricting situation, both in terms of state districting and federal districting, has been a major issue for a very long time. There are literally dozens of Supreme Court cases around this, because it is illegal, for instance, to gerrymander a particular district on the basis of race. All right. But in the last, let's call it like 15, 20 years, the Republicans have started gerrymandering red states, particularly to essentially prevent Democratic candidates from taking control of both state legislatures and dominant roles in the House of Representatives. One of the things that is particularly concerning about all of this is that, as many of you know, when redistricting is done either on racial or on party lines, often you end up with these insane districts where I saw one yesterday for a city in Texas where, under the new redistricting proposal, half of the parking garage is in one district, but the exit ramp from the parking garage is in another. Okay. That's just one example of how weird this can get. But more significantly, gerrymandering and redistricting, when it's done for these nefarious purposes, is often done block by block based on who is registered to vote in a given home. And this has resulted in things like Jim Jordan having a district in Ohio that looks like the shape of a duck. Okay. It's also resulted in really weird districts that are like a tiny little strip of about 6 different areas, because those areas contain all Democrats and therefore they're contained there, or it's majority Democrat. And that means like these huge districts right next to them are like a Democrat could legitimately never get elected. And this is happening more and more in cities, which obviously largely skew blue. In case you didn't know that, generally speaking, most cities around the country are blue dots, even in red states. And the effort behind this, of course, right now is to allow the GOP and the MAGA movement to maintain power however they can. Okay, so with that background, one of the things that has happened in the last few weeks is that Gavin Newsom, who I will freely admit at the moment I am very displeased with for a variety of reasons, he has come forward, nonetheless, with a proposal. And the proposal is that, given what Texas is trying to do, California and other blue states should redistrict to benefit Democrats. And I have to say that, notwithstanding the fact that this was never how districting was supposed to work, I happen to think that this is a moment to go balls to the wall, for lack of a better way of putting it. I think that it is time for Democrats to stop taking the high road when it comes to this sort of thing and to actually fight fire with fire. Now, I got wind of the fact on the Patreon feed this morning. Reminder, if you want to ask me questions, get other perks, get bonus broadcasts, please consider supporting us by becoming a paid subscriber over at patreon.com/resistancelive for as little as $5 a month. That's as little as 20 cents a broadcast. Head on over there and help us out. This morning on the question feed, a Patreon subscriber mentioned that the League of Women Voters in California or maybe it's just a chapter, don't want to misrepresent the whole organization, but maybe just a chapter, had actually come out against this proposal by Gavin Newsom, essentially along the idea of like, we shouldn't do what they're doing, right? The problem with this is that because the Republicans have lost any form of moral judgment, and because the MAGA movement is essentially about keeping white men in power, we have to actually take a responsible tactic in response to this that is about the fact that this is a fight for this country and to make it better, and not just about moral principle. All right. So Allison Gill was talking about this last night on Blue Sky, and I was also talking about it on Blue Sky. And I will just say that we share the same philosophy here. Okay. And I'm not the only one to suggest this, neither is Allison, but I have to say that I truly think this is a turning point issue at this point in terms of where we are as a big tent Democratic Party. Okay. And I will say this also, right? I am very, very bothered at the moment, and have been really for quite some time now, by the way in which like the Democratic leadership and establishment seems to be like, not much we can do, right? Like, we're not the ones in power, as opposed to doing things that the Republicans have done when they're not in power, like forever, like literally for like the last 30 or 40 years. There have been roadmaps to try to take over state legislatures through tactics like this. Okay. I am with AG. I'm with the other people who have said this, that not only should Democrats match what's happening in Texas, district for district, but we should actually do it everywhere. Because if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. And at this point, okay, there is no reason for us to play nice on this issue. None. And of course, I will remind everybody that no less than the Supreme Court, has been enforcing voting rights laws with regard to redistricting in places like Alabama as recently as last year. They forced Alabama to redistrict twice, so that it included 2 majority Black districts and not just one, because they had tried to kind of like essentially put only one district in all of Alabama that was majority Black. Again, that's racist gerrymandering. I am not suggesting that, but what I am suggesting, meaning like in any form that would arguably run afoul of the fact that racist gerrymandering is illegal, but I am suggesting that redistricting for purposes of majority Democratic districts, like hell yes. Why would we not do that? That is a tool we have in our toolkit. We should use it. Like 100%. Let them try to challenge that in court. We'll see how that goes, given that they've been challenged in court about it over and over and over again. And often they've been allowed to get away with it. All right. There's an enormous amount of precedent that says that like, you're going to redistrict on the basis of like X, Y, or Z excuse. Fine. Not for racial reasons, but for other reasons. Okay. So from this perspective, my view on this is that it's time to absolutely go nuclear, as the title of this broadcast said today. I am out of patience for Democrats who are unwilling to fight. And I will add that there is a deep need right now for the Democratic Party establishment to also recognize that future leaders are rising right now, right? In the form of Mamdani, in the form of the state senator who is now going to be the Democratic mayoral candidate in Minneapolis, in the form of a whole slew of other folks who have joined Run for Something. By the way, there's a great thread from Amanda Littman about this morning on Blue Sky, all of whom are progressive, left-leaning, sometimes democratic socialists, very much in favor of like stopping fascism in its tracks and finding ways to really improve the lives of everyday Americans. So these two things combined are the kind of thing that I'm looking for right now for the future of the Democratic Party if it's going to continue to exist. And I will remind you all that the ratings of the Democratic Party right now are 13 points below the approval ratings of the GOP. Like regular old Democrats, folks who have been Democrats like their whole lives, of every stripe, centrist, liberal, progressive, are deeply displeased with what the party is doing. The way you get back that support is by fighting fire with fire in this moment and putting forward and endorsing candidates who actually have principled positions and the deep desire to make the lives of their constituents better. This is kind of like a no-brainer, right? To me, this is a total no-brainer. Like, why would we not do this? These two things combined are like demonstrably successful strategies right now. So he should do it. And I'm just going to say this, like any old school, allegedly blue organization that says that, it's a matter of right or wrong when it comes to redistricting is not actually dealing with the reality of where we are, okay? Like, democracy is shattering as we speak. And if you want to preserve it, you better be prepared to fight. Like, that's really all there is to it. And I mean that as a party, right? Okay, speaking of democracy and capitulation and other kinds of things, yesterday we had another announcement from a major Ivy League university that they have capitulated to Trump and agreed to pay a $50 million settlement for something. You know, we talked about the whole situation with Harvard earlier this week. I don't know. You know, I'm not exactly sure what it is that Brown University is paying for, but the controls that the Trump administration has gotten them to agree to in exchange for these $50 million are galling. Curriculum control, right? Review of the, the capacity to oversee reviews of individual professors, right? Demands that, certain aspects of cultural life be celebrated and others be squashed. I have to say, and I said this last night on Blue Sky, I expected academia to come under attack when Trump took office the second time. Those of you who read Timothy Snyder's work know that one of the pillars of the way that fascism functions, tyranny functions, is that attacks on academics, who often are a place where people actually learn what authoritarianism and fascism looks like, is a huge pillar of how fascist regimes take power, right? So none of that is surprising. What has been surprising is just the rank capitulation, the utter unwillingness to fight that is shocking. This morning, by the way, a whole bunch of Harvard professors, speaking of Harvard, have sent a letter to the president about the danger of the agreement that they are reaching with the Trump administration. And we'll see where that goes. But, these universities, which of course have been held up as bastions of academic success and freedom, not always the case, but nonetheless have been held up that way, right? As elite institutions, are really kind of like playing a little bit fast and loose with their future. Because I will tell you personally, these kind of capitulations do not make me confident about those universities being safe places for everyone. And in fact, I don't know. I have 2 kids to educate. They're a ways off from that. But, I'm not going to be looking at any university that has cut a deal like this, because it tells me something about their willingness to protect their kids, right? And provide a truthful education. So all of this is, disheartening, to say the least. Okay. Somebody asked a question this morning on the Patreon feed about the USDA gathering information on SNAP requests. So as many of you know, SNAP benefits are one of the things that was cut in the murder budget. And the USDA is being asked to turn over data about who is receiving SNAP benefits. Now, there's 2 ways that this could go. One of the ways that it could go is in relation to work requirements, because you all may remember that this issue of work requirements for food stamps was one of the things that was up for debate. So that may be one reason why they're tracking it, okay? The other reason why they're tracking it could have to do with like more nefarious purposes. And I have said many, many times here that the collection of data, which of course was one of the big missions of DOGE, unstated missions of DOGE, out of the federal government, raises really deep concerns. What are they intending to do with the data of SNAP recipients? Like, why are they collecting it? And I think part of the question right now has to do with how they are using that data to persecute people, frankly. I am not pleased with it, but I will also say that I think the cover that's going to be given for it has to do with work requirements and what's in the murder budget. So we'll see where that one goes. Okay, somebody asked me a question this morning about how Ghislaine Maxwell was able to appeal to SCOTUS, to the Supreme Court. So we talked on yesterday's broadcast at length about her appeal and what it's about. And so if you missed that, if you missed the whole story about how she's appealing on grounds that she couldn't have been prosecuted under Epstein's 2007 range deal, non-prosecution agreement that was reached with him the first time he was arrested, you should go back and watch yesterday's broadcast, okay? But I want to explain something from the perspective of like criminal cases, because there's clearly a little bit of a, misunderstanding about how this works. Okay, so reminder, Ghislaine Maxwell was prosecuted in federal court, okay? Federal district court for the Southern District of New York, all right? The allegations against her were federal sex trafficking crimes. Okay, here comes my former Columbia Law professor hat again, as I like to say here on the broadcast. Reminder, We have two sets of courts in this country that meet at the top, okay? We have state courts on one arm, right? That's like, you know, the New York, well, New York's not a good example because there are misnomers. Let's just say this, a New Jersey trial court, then a New Jersey appeals court, then the New Jersey Supreme Court, then the Supreme Court of the United States. That's one arm, okay? Other side is federal district courts, federal circuit courts of appeal. We spent a lot of time yesterday talking about this because of Emile Beauvais. Those meet also Supreme Court of the United States. So think of it like a pyramid, okay? State courts on one arm, federal courts on the other. Everything meets at the Supreme Court of the United States at the top. Because she was prosecuted in federal court, her appeals must run through federal circuit courts of appeal and to the Supreme Court, okay? So there's nothing unusual about her appealing to the Supreme Court of the United States. And in fact, if you happen to be a criminal defendant who is prosecuted in a federal district court, your immediate route of appeal is through the federal court system, okay? But even if not, and this is where, like, you know, the nuances of the law become important. Let's say hypothetically you're prosecuted on the state law side, okay? And you get to the state Supreme Court in your state and the Supreme Court says, nope, you're convicted, off you go to prison. You still have an opportunity to file in federal court. And again, this will sound very familiar to those of you who have been following the immigration law issues, a writ of habeas corpus. So habeas corpus is, of course, the means by which the people, for instance, who were sent to SCOTUS can file an action in the district court for the District of Columbia demanding due process. What a habeas corpus petition does is it demands that a public official do something, like essentially do their job, okay? So for the folks using habeas corpus in the District Court of the District of Columbia, because they were sent to SCOTUS, they are asking the court to enforce principles of due process by federal officials, okay? That's what they're asking for. If you are a criminal defendant, let's just say you've like run through all of your appeal possibilities on the state side of the fence, you can then start at the bottom, federal district court, and apply a writ of habeas corpus. And that will demand, for instance, that you be released because the officials involved, I don't know, withheld evidence, right? And your conviction is wrongful. Now, you may have tried that in state court already. I would hope that if you have an argument for that, your defense attorney has done so. But you can also start at the bottom and work your way up that way. Very common, by the way, in death penalty appeals for there to be first an attempt to run through all the state appeals processes and then an attempt to run through the federal. Nonetheless, because Maxwell was originally prosecuted in federal court, she gets to go district court, that's the trial court, circuit court of appeals, that's the immediate appeals court, Supreme Court of the United States. That's her traditional route, okay? And the argument that she is making that essentially she should not have been prosecuted because Epstein, as a part of his non-pros agreement, had a clause in there that excluded, that is very unusual and very unethical, everyone else in his inner circle from being prosecuted for the same crimes. Honestly, don't think that should stand up. This is the whole Alex Acosta thing that we talked about yesterday. She does have a basis to appeal on that issue to the Supreme Court. Now, we talked about this yesterday. Whether or not the Supreme Court takes the case is anybody's guess. I said yesterday, and I will just repeat here for those who didn't watch, that if the Supreme Court takes up this case and overturns it, overturns her conviction, there's still the possibility of a new trial, maybe. But the other thing is that if the Supreme Court does that, the MAGA base will be destroyed, okay? So we don't know how this is all going to go, but that is the route that got her legitimately to the Supreme Court, just like every other criminal defendant has a route. So there's nothing unusual about that at all. Okay. This morning, we had a filing. This is very disturbing. That essentially is asking the Supreme Court to overturn Obergefell, which is the case that made same-sex marriage legal inside the United States. Now, we knew this was coming. We had, in the case in Dobbs and in other cases since, we've seen Alito and others, and Thomas in particular, signal they wanted a case brought before the Supreme Court that would potentially challenge Obergefell. Now, this case is unlikely to be the case that does it, but, and I'll tell you why in a second, but it's still like deeply disturbing that this effort is being made. So does everybody remember Kim Davis? If you don't remember that name, she was the county clerk or the marriage clerk rather, in a town in Kentucky who refused, after the Obergefell decision, to issue marriage certificates to same-sex couples. And she was eventually removed from her job, and she was held in contempt, and a variety of other things happened. Here we are now 10 years later. Her case is on appeal. And speaking of appeals routes, what has happened now is that in the appeal of her case, her lawyers are asking the Supreme Court to overturn Obergefell because it was improperly decided and therefore she should have been permissibly not required to issue a same-sex marriage certificate. Now, this whole thing, this is a real long shot. Like, in fact, I would call it like a shot in the dark, all right? Because her case as it is positioned doesn't really have the right posture that you would expect it to have to overturn an entire constitutional principle, the grounds on which Obergefell was decided, okay? But all that said, the Supreme Court is fairly unpredictable on these issues right now. And I don't think this is going to be the case, but this is the case that does it. But I would not be surprised at all to see other efforts emerging to try to overturn same-sex marriage. And so all of this, deeply disturbing, wrong, and I'm just going to say this as well, will require all of us to stand up, as we should be doing anyway, on behalf of our LGBTQ plus siblings to protect their rights, right? I mean, this is everybody who is marginalized is under attack right now. And this is one place in which it is taking place. So I don't want people to lose it yet, because I have to say that I think Kim Davis's case is not likely the case to do it, but there will be other efforts. Like, we knew this was coming. It was signaled in Project 2025. So everybody should be aware that that's happened, and it's being filed by an evangelical group, not surprisingly, called Liberty Council. I wrote it down in scribble, Liberty Council, which also, by the way, is a church. Very strange posture for a case to move to the Supreme Court in this way. Okay. I have to respond to something that came up in the comments to my broadcast yesterday. I think it was yesterday, where I made some comments about Gaza and the starvation, the intentional starvation of Palestinians. So let's just back up for a second. Many of us have seen that now famous photograph of a mother holding her emaciated child, right? Ribs, spine, everything completely visible. And I have to say that I find even this retraction abominable, but I'm going to tell you why, all right? Since then, I believe it was the New York Times. It might have been the Atlantic, but I think it was the New York Times that initially published the photograph, has issued like what they're referring to as a retraction, okay? And what they're saying is that child had a pre-existing condition. Therefore, it was a slight misrepresentation to say that this child was being starved. Bullshit. Okay, so what happened yesterday in my comments, and I saw this when I logged in this morning, was that somebody claimed that me talking about this starving child, obviously emaciated starving child among thousands of starving children in Gaza, dozens of whom are dying of starvation every day. Someone came into my comments and said, you're furthering Hamas propaganda by talking about the starvation of Palestinians in Gaza. Okay, I just don't even know how people can like fall down that propaganda hole and have like literally no empathy or grief about the intentional starvation of children. Like, I just want to make it really clear, because I know I'm really fired up right now. There is irrefutable evidence that Israel has purposefully designed what they are doing in Gaza to starve its citizens. It is end-stage genocide behavior. Full stop. And like, I don't really care what anybody says in the comments about this. It's like, those are the facts. Okay, they're the facts. And as somebody who was a human rights lawyer for like, a decade and a half, I see this and I think about the definitions of genocide in the UN charters, and there can be no debate. There is no debate about what it is, okay? And the evidence and the facts and how they've limited aid and they've stopped food from getting in. They have shot Palestinians who are waiting in line for food, children, mothers, okay? I mean, like, it is what it looks like, all right? All that said, for anybody who has a question about this pre-existing condition thing, I'm going to talk about something that I mentioned this morning on Blue Sky, because this is a really important legal doctrine for people to be aware of, all right? So there is something in the common law, that means like the law that has descended through legal interpretation for centuries, called the eggshell skull rule. And what it says is that if you set out to commit an act, and in the course of that act, something unexpected comes to pass, you are still responsible for the outcome. Okay, so where the doctrine comes from, just so everybody understands, is this hypothetical. You get into an argument with someone, you push them. Maybe not hard, like a little shove. The person falls down and their head explodes. Okay, I know that's kind of graphic, but this is where it comes from. The idea being that the person that you have pushed, maybe with no intent to kind of like cause their death, has an eggshell skull. Okay, you as a defendant are responsible legally for that death. Okay, even if it was totally unforeseeable, because you take the plaintiff, the victim, as they come. All right, so let's apply this to this circumstance right now. Okay, Israel takes conscious steps to starve every single person inside Gaza. Intentional. Denies aid, stops food aid from coming over, stops shipments, threatens to prosecute or cut off access of journalists that use drones to show what's happening there, right? They make all these intentional choices to literally starve children, families, individuals inside Gaza, everybody, okay? The last count, by the way, just so everybody knows this, the low estimate is that Israel has killed 60,000 Palestinians, okay? Like there's just no debate about this at this point, okay? Let's just say Israel they make a decision. Netanyahu regime makes a decision, and the decision is, we are going to deny food. We're going to keep food out of this area. We are going to intentionally starve and ethnically cleanse this area, okay? And in the process of that, some of the people that they're starving have pre-existing conditions. The Netanyahu regime is still legally, including under customary international law as it applies inside the United States, still legally responsible for that child's suffering and death. Okay. And this, by the way, applies in other circumstances, right? You are somebody who gets engaged in an armed robbery. Okay. You walk into a convenience store, you pull out a gun. The guy behind the counter has a heart attack. You are responsible for that person's death, even if you never pull the trigger. Okay. This is a very baseline doctrine of law. Okay. So I'm just going to say this for anybody who may be listening, who has fallen down the propaganda hole, that somehow this is all justifiable. First of all, you're wrong. Okay. Like, I'm just going to say that. I don't care if it loses me subscribers. You're wrong. Like, this is a moral line in the sand. It is what it is. And it is completely unjustifiable. But in case you happen to be one of those people who's like, that retraction means that we're following like, some Hamas propaganda, wrong, fully wrong. Under the eggshell skull doctrine, Israel is still liable for that child's suffering and death. Still, non-negotiable. All right. So I want everyone to be mindful, okay, that there is still an enormous amount of propaganda and disinformation floating around on all kinds of topics. All right. And it is really critical to understand that the way propaganda works is that it plays on our intergenerational trauma. It plays on our internal biases. It often plays on learned racism, sexism, and otherisms. And it is designed to drive division. Why? Because division allows violence and evil to flourish. Okay? This situation is wholly, undeniably amoral. And you either have to get in line behind the idea that the forced starvation of civilian populations to the point of mass death is unacceptable, no matter who does it, or you're on the wrong side of history. Full stop. That's my little rant about that today. All right. But that's the eggshell skull doctrine, which I thought everybody might be interested to hear. Okay. We have a few other things to cover before I get to my special little thing at the end of the broadcast. So we had a lot of questions here today about media, how to get solid information. Speaking of propaganda, what's happening inside the New York Times, inside CBS, and some of these other mainstream media institutions that are crumbling or capitulating or becoming more and more complicit in what the Trump regime is doing. So let me just say this, okay? The clearest, most truthful, most honorable journalism right now is coming out of independent media. All right. And sometimes that means folks who have left traditional media, like Joy Reid gets fired from MSNBC and starts her own platform. Mehdi Hassan gets fired from MSNBC, starts his own platform. That is, particularly Zateo, Mehdi Hassan's platform is apparently a $3 million a month endeavor now or something like that in terms of the revenue they're bringing in. Don't quote me on that, but they're making a lot of money. Those independent journalism sites are really critical, but I'm also just going to say something else. Okay. There are many, many more folks like myself or like Marissa Kabas or like Allison Gill, who are out here essentially doing our own production, out here doing our own media creation and putting it out with no team or a tiny team, right? That's not the case, by the way, for the folks who have 5 million, 6 million followers on YouTube. They've got full-blown production just like mainstream media, all right? They've got editors on staff. They've got camera people. They have video teams. That's not me. I'm sitting here talking to a camera right now and there's no one else in the room. This is all me, right? Same thing for AG. She has maybe one podcast producer behind the scenes and that's it. It is critically important if you want the truth to thrive in this era with people who are really committed to giving you honest analysis and information that you support independent media. I can't say this loudly enough. And I dropped this into our community space here on YouTube today because I think people don't understand in many instances what it takes for small creators and commentators like myself, like AG, the folks who do not have the $5 million 5 million followers and are making $2 million a month in YouTube ad revenue. What it takes for folks like us to do this is an enormous amount of hard work and frankly, a lot of unpaid time. And so if you're concerned about how to uplift the truth and you're concerned about what media is going to look like as we proceed through this era, it's the independent voices that matter the most, okay? And this is not a plea for you to subscribe to me. I mean, you could subscribe to my Patreon. Yes, that would be lovely. I'm not going to tell you not to do that. And I love our Patreon subscribers and I love our members here on the YouTube channel. You guys rock. But honestly, this is in principle something that needs to be very widespread at this point. You should, take your $5 a month or whatever it's going to be and devote it to independent media voices that are committed to telling the truth and are committed to doing it in ways that are not about inflammatory or salacious media generation, as we talked about earlier this week, but are really invested in not just giving you facts, but also providing the means for everyday folks to resist and fight back, which is, of course, what I'm all about here. So please make sure that you are committing to supporting the voices that make a difference to you, okay? That is, by the way, one really key way to fight back against propaganda. And I'll also just say that all of us are in our own way putting ourselves on the line, because if, God forbid, we start to see censorship on this platform or others, we're going to be out of luck, right? We're not the people who have major bank because, we were anchors for 10 years or something like that. So just please keep that in mind. And, it really is important to think through the dynamics of potential future censorship, the way in which mainstream media outlets are capitulating, their editors, their leadership are refusing to publish certain stories or spinning certain stories in ways that benefit the administration, and to think through where you want to make sure that alternative voices survive and how you're going to be a part of doing that. All right. Okay. Somebody asked about insomnia. I have to laugh at you guys when these questions come up on the Patreon feed, by the way, because right now, this person was like, I had that hard inhale wake up at 3 a.m. Okay, that's me. That happens to me 5 nights a week right now. Just flat honest on that. All right. And this person was like, I'm doing my meditation practice. I'm taking care of myself. How do I stop that from happening? I don't know. You can take a cortisol support vitamin. I do that. You can take Ativan for anxiety if your doctor prescribes it for you. But I have to tell you that, one of the things about the era that we're living in is, of course, it's anxiogenic. If you're not having anxiety and fear, and in some instances, shock at where we are, you're honestly like an ostrich with your head in the sand, right? The question is what do we do with those emotional responses? And, as always, I will just say this: the more involved you are in doing good work with people who are pushing back, the easier it will be to sleep at night. And that includes, by the way, building community with folks that you can rely on when you're super stressed out. This is one of those things that I cultivate in all of our training programs, right? Particularly inside the Ripple Effect Institute, we do a lot of good work on resilience and managing these tough emotions and the ways in which we need to be working those muscles like every day right now. It's really critical. And simultaneously, some of this is about the legitimate emotional response to fascism, right? So I encourage you, if you need mental health support, to seek it out. And also simultaneously, you will find that if you get into mutual aid, which by the way is also emotional, with other folks who are doing this work, it will be easier because it will give you hope. Okay, it will give you hope. All right, we have come to the part of my final gift for the day. And I'm doing this because I actually did this yesterday in a call that we had for the Ripple Effect Institute, and it made a very big difference for people. Okay, so we have a lot of viewers here who may not have read my book. And that's fine. It's called Becoming Heroines. It came out in 2021. The Amazon editorial chief staff named it one of the top 10 business and leadership books of 2021. So gratitude for that. But inside this book, there is a story. And the story came from a dream that I had, literally 8 days after the 2016 election. And when I was asked to read this yesterday inside one of our Ripple Effect Institute events, I had a very hard time getting through it without crying. But it provided our students inside there with some true resonant hope. So I'm going to give it to you guys today because I'm getting so many comments that are like, I'm losing hope. I feel like we're out of time. This is something that I think will help. All right. So bear with me because I'm going to read it out loud to all of you. All right. And the way that this first made it into the public domain was in a Facebook post back when I was still on Facebook on November 17th of 2016. So that's 8 days after the 2016 election. Here's what it is. Okay. I'm going to crib out the names for security purposes, but this is the story. All right. And I hope this benefits all of you today. And I'm going to do my best not to cry. Deep in the dream world last night, I was in an enormous field with other women. Some were strangers. Others were sisters I have walked with in this life. Some old friends, others newer compatriots, known and unknown to me. And in the field, we were in the midst of initiation. From the late night into the dawn, we initiated each other. We danced around each woman one by one as families and friends sat on the sidelines looking on. We held hands and blessed each other and cleansed each other with tears and laughter. We put our hands on each other and we held on when we needed to. We each stepped into the circle and circles upon circles throughout the night in this field, one by one, woman by woman, thousands of us. And though the rain rose and the wind howled and the trees around us shed their leaves and the skies opened up and the lightning came and the onlookers thought we would not make it, we kept going. We were not afraid. And when it was my turn, I stepped into the circle and felt the hands and arms and force of thousands of women around me. I was held and I was loved and I was danced and I was witnessed. The night got darker and I closed my eyes and just allowed myself to be held and seen and touched. And when I opened my eyes, the sun was rising. And as the sun came up full force, we were together in that field as sisters, all of us, thousands of us, with flowers in our hair and laughter and celebration and joy. And we saw each other as if we were seeing each other for the first time, as we had always been, and we were happy, powerful, connected, aligned, untouchable, and as fearless as the earth, as nature, as the circles of time, and we honored one another. And then I woke up. So let me say this to you this morning, my sisters. I will stand with you through the storm, and I will witness your struggle. And I will hold you when you need it, and I will honor your strength when you don't. And though the storms may rage, and the sky may open up, and the world may appear to be ending, I will keep going. because on the other side of where we are now may very well be freedom. And I am not afraid of the darkness. I am more powerful than it will ever be. So are you. Love to all. That is my gift to you today. And I will tell you, I come back to that dream over and over and over again, even though it's now almost 9 years on, because it was what I believe to be a download of the importance of remembering that this moment, however awful, however full of trauma and disgusting developments, however much evil we are witnessing, not only do we have to keep going, but we have to remember that there's something on the other side of it. And the sun will come up again. And we will be there to bear witness to it if we can stick together and keep doing the work. That's it for today, my friends. You all rock. Please, if you like what we're doing here, become a paid subscriber over on Patreon and support us. Again, independent media matters a lot right now. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. Share this broadcast with others, especially those who may be struggling, who might need it. And I am here tomorrow live, regular time. There will be a bonus broadcast for our Patreon subscribers tomorrow afternoon as usual. And yeah, I wish you all well. Please take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and I will catch you all here live tomorrow. And by the way, if you don't know where to start in terms of making a difference, download our free guide on how to make a difference where you live, and how to do it without burning out, because every single voice is needed right now. Okay, my friends, lots of love to all of you. Take care of yourselves, and I will catch you all here tomorrow. All right, bye.